That's my mom. She's a Hapa. And so am I.
Last summer when I was in Kuwait, I was walking through a farmer's market Sunday afternoon, and a Caucasian man called me over to his booth and struck up a conversation with me. And as I was speaking to him, he referred to me as a mongrel.
Wait, so what's a mongrel?
Noun, a dog of no definable type or breed, a lovable mongrel puppy, synonymous with crossbreed, of mixed breed, half-breed, interbreed, a mongrel bitch.
Oh, back to the story.
I gave him a funny look because as a person of a mixed race, I've been called a lot of things in my life, but I've never been called a mixed dog before.
Hi, my name is Samantha Daly. You're listening to my podcast titled Check One Please, White, Asian, Hapa. Thank you for listening. What exactly is a Hapa?
Somebody who has mixed ethnicities.
That's Nohea Shozen, a student at AU, and another Hapa.
Like, seriously?
Yeah, you don't need to shorten it, so I'm just
Okay. Like, you want me to actually name and list everything that I know that I am?
Yeah.
Okay. French, Scottish, Irish, Portuguese, Welsh, Filipino, Chinese, Japanese, Ashkenazi Jewish, North African, I don't know, like what country, Hawaiian Native American.
The term Hapa can mean different things to different people, but in general, it refers to any person of mixed race or ethnicity. The term originates in Hawaii, where Nohea is from, and it comes from a mix of different languages that just means half, Hapa.
I identify with one race more than the other depending on which environment I'm in. So if I'm in Japan, I identify more with being white or Hawaiian. But if I'm on the East Coast, I identify with being, Japanese or Hawaiian. Because I often feel like a minority compared to the majority. So obviously the majority on the East Coast is going to be white people. Although I do identify with them to an extent, I also am an outcast a lot of times, just like culturally. So that's why in my group of majority, maybe of like white people, I'm still an outcast, if that makes sense.
Last summer, I had the amazing opportunity to visit Hawaii, and I was actually shocked to see so many people that look like me. Asianish with darker complexions and like all these different mixes of beautiful people. What was it like to grow up in a place like Hawaii where 1 out of every 4 people were Hapa?
It was a big relief coming back from Japan because although I didn't fully, culturally fully identify with, the Hawaiian local culture, I did look like everybody, and that was very new and very exciting, and I felt a little bit more at home than anywhere else.
Growing up, I always identified more with being black because my mom looked mostly black, and she always called me her little brown baby. And I remember the first time I realized I wasn't white. I was playing with my friend around the same age, and then one of his friends came over to join us, and I didn't know who he was, but he was also a white boy. And he immediately took my friend aside, and he was like, "John, you know she's black, right?" And he was like, "Oh, yeah, I guess." And I was like, "I'm black?" I was confused. I was like, I knew I wasn't like
White.
the same looking. Like I kind of looked Hispanic, I always thought. And I'd played soccer, so there was a lot of like those girls on my team.
Right.
So, that's when I think that really stuck with me. And I've always really thought I looked more black than I actually was. And this was also when I had really curly, like crazy wild hair that I didn't know how to control. So Um, but now I get a lot that I look Asian or because my hair is usually straight, Filipino, or like I'm very much put into this Asian box now. So it's like interesting to see the way that other people have looked at me, like
The way
as
they
I
categorize you.
right
Yeah.
as I grow up, and the way that my features change.
Yeah.
But I'm still the same amount of like each race,
Right.
if that makes sense.
It's interesting being a person of mixed race because people react differently to you. He saw the offense on my face and he said that he didn't mean to offend me, that it was actually a term of endearment. And I said, it's a funny term of endearment to call someone a mixed dog. And he said, no, my children are of mixed race. I have 2 adopted children. They're of mixed race, and I refer to them as mongrels. I was taken aback because I did not find that endearing at all. But I was obvious, and I think the man was sincere, that he did use that as a term of endearment. So as I go through my life, I do find that people react differently to people of mixed race. And in my 52 years, I've never been able to figure out why. People don't look at me as a person. They look at me as a person of mixed race. And I think that's sad. But I think Hapa is a descriptive term. And for some reason, we need to be able to describe people. I'm not sure why, but people feel an overwhelming need to have to categorize different people. And I find this inherently an American habit. There are other ethnicities that do refer to others, but they tend to be a more homogeneous society. And so when they are describing someone outside of their homogeneous race, they have names for that.
I didn't really experience racism until I moved to Japan from Seattle when I was about like elementary school, like first grade. Um, I think my darker like skin tone and just like my features are not Japanese in Japan anyway. And so I had like a couple of bullies, but one was really bad, where I think it's just because I look different. I was easy to pick on. And like she would just bully me badly. Whether that was like pushing me out in the street or like stepping on me, whatever it was. So because of that, I actually moved schools. But I realized that at every single school I moved to, nothing would change. You know, people would call me names like gorilla because I was darker than everybody, or just like foreigner. It's called gaijin in Japanese, and that was like constantly my nickname. Would like didn't matter what school I went to, private school, public school, and so that's when I realized like it's not something I can run away with, but people are going to categorize me, so I just have to adapt to that.
In America, ironically, we are known as a melting pot, but we tend to identify with different groups, and we like to categorize ourselves, whether it's on a census or if it's in a job application.
In a culture that's always trying to categorize you, have you ever felt like you had to pick one race over the other in certain situations?
I think you do. And I think you do because I think that there are certain protections when you identify with a certain group. And I like that. I think everyone has to belong somewhere. But I also think that it's very important to be proud of who you are.
Because I'm mixed, I'm actually really lucky because I get to kind of have like a foot in every single door. Where like, I can hang out with the white kids, I can hang out with the Asian kids, I can hang out with the Polynesian kids because I am a part of all of them. I can't find time to like hang out with all of them all the time, so I'm not fully a part of all of them, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like I'm accepted, but I'm not a part of them a lot of times.
When I was younger, I grew up on a military base, and there were military members and families that have lived all over the world, and there were people from all over the world, where there are various spouses and lots of mixed children. So I saw that as something positive and something normal. But I also had my share of teasing. I am half Asian and half black, and I remember very distinctly in elementary school being teased by Caucasian classmates for having slanted eyes. And they would have, pretty mean taunts about the way I looked. I do remember one time in the playground being very upset about it, but I never cried about it. And as I grew older, I realized that those children that made fun of me were not very enlightened and really just didn't understand. So it started to bother me less and less. And I think as I grew up, it actually helped strengthen my identity and how I felt about myself. I don't see myself as a mixed race person. I only identify myself as a mixed race person when I have to identify with a group.
Because Hapa means that you kind of fit in anywhere. You're mixed. A lot of people like being mixed, whether it's just because people say Hapa people are better looking. I don't know. That's just what I've heard. Might not be true.
I don't know. Maybe, probably.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm biased. Maybe you're biased. But yeah, no, Hapa is definitely not frowned upon, and I don't think it's really, I don't know. If you're Hapa, you're mixed, so you can like fit in anywhere generally. I think it's a very empowering term, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. My mother is Taiwanese, and my father is African American, and I am both, and I'm proud to be both.
So there's this common phenomenon among mixed people that they feel a pressure to have to belong in one category. And for that, usually it means choosing one of their races to identify with more than the other in certain situations. This term Hapa is increasingly popular because that allows mixed people to create their own category. And they can choose all of the above, all of their races. They don't just have to check one. You're listening to my podcast titled Check One Please. White, Asian, Hapa.